Call the meeting to order. Ask you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's consent agenda consists of the following items. A, approve the minutes of the following City Council work session, October 19th, City Council regular meeting, October 19th, City Council special closed meeting, November 2nd. Item B, authorize the mayor to execute a city assessment agreement between the City of Winsted and McLeod County Assessor for the year 2022 for a total amount not to exceed $12,127.50. Item C, schedule a public hearing for January 4th at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers to consider adopting amendments to the fee schedule ordinance. Item D, schedule a public hearing for January 18 at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers to consider adopting amendments to Chapter 14 of the Winsted Municipal Code related to short-term rentals. Item E, authorize the mayor to execute a liability coverage waiver form allowing the City of Winsted to not waive the monetary limits on municipal tort liability established by the Minnesota State Statutes 466.04 for the 2022 property and casualty insurance contract. Item F, authorize city administrator not to purchase no-fault sewer backup insurance coverage for the 2022 property and casualty insurance contract. Item G, authorize city administrator to purchase $1 million in excess liability coverage for the 2022 property and casualty insurance contract. Item H, terminate the land lease agreement between the City of Winsted and Mr. Marlon Zierman for hangar number 32 at the Winsted Airport. Item I, approve the land lease agreement between the City of Winsted and Mr. Stephen Roman for hangar number 32 at the Winsted Municipal Airport, based upon the successful submission of all required documents and fees to the City of Winsted. Item J, adopt resolution R-21-48, accepting a contribution from gambling proceeds from the Church of Holy Trinity in the amount of $2,500 to be dedicated to the city's park fund. Item K, adopt Mr. Isaac Zach.
Yep.
Don't know about that name, but that's right. To the position of volunteer firefighter with the Winsted Fire Department, contingent upon passing a criminal background check and a drug and alcohol test. Item I, appoint Mrs. Laura Zupek to the position of volunteer firefighter with the Winsted Fire Department, contingent upon passing a criminal background check and a drug and alcohol test. And last item, A or M, approve the claims list for December 7th. Consent agenda, anyone make a motion for that?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'll motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have a public hearing tonight, and how we're going to run this is, I'll just give you a brief outline before we get started. Adam will go through the slides presentation, and after he's done, we'll open it up for the public to make any comments. And after the comment session is done, we will look for a motion to close that section, and then we'll look to accept the motion for accepting the budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Yep. Good evening, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of the City Council. As you stated, tonight, per state statute, is Winsted's presentation of truth in taxation to the residents. The presentation will include, obviously, the overall recommended 2022 budget process, a review of the general fund line items that were changed for both expenditures and revenues. We'll look at the overall recommended 2022 general and debt service property tax levies, and then how it impacts the properties here in Winsted. And then, as Steve said, we will open it up for public comment. So the process, our budget process starts in early July and carries throughout August with the staff preparing their recommendations for their specific departments. After that, in August and September, the City Council discusses the recommendations during their work sessions, and ultimately approves the preliminary levy on September 15th. Per state statute, once the preliminary levy is set, it can be lowered, but it cannot be increased. After September 15th, then the City Council met again on October 26th for a day-long budgeting session to thoroughly review every section or every fund within the budget, including airport funds, capital funds, fire funds, general fund, etc. That brings us to this evening, December 7th, when we host the Truth and Taxation. And then ultimately, on December 21st, at the next City Council meeting, we will have the City Council adopt the recommended 2022 budget and certify the recommended 2022 general and debt service property tax levies. As we're working through this process, we tried to use a 5-year model to help assist our decision-making process, knowing that decisions we make right now will also impact us in the future. So again, this is just a model. It's not hard numbers that we stick with necessarily, it's just how we model out our budget over a 5-year period. All the activity within our funds are portrayed on this spreadsheet, looking at 2021 versus 2022, but the variance is actually the variance between the expenditures and revenues in 2022. As you can see throughout our fund activity, we certainly are at a surplus per se, but again, this is a crossover of all the activity, including some debt service funds, etc. Some of the dollars spent, for example, in the general fund cross over into the capital fund. So again, this is all activity within government operations on this slide right here. This chart kind of shows the activity over a 5-year period. What we're planning for 2022, again, another project or a little bit more activity in 2022 compared to 2021, and that's a reflection of the planned mill and overlay projects on Pheasant Run out on Lake Drive and Lake Court. So you can see that in the capital funds, and then the orange color is our general fund, so that stays pretty consistent over every year. In 2018, significant activity, and that was due to the sewer plant rehab project that we did. Another slide portraying the government activity all combined, again, over that same 5-year period. Certainly budgeting more revenues than expenditures so that our funds are structurally balanced. Now, specifically within our general fund or with our operating funds within the city, we have some assumptions built into this, to the general fund, including the implementations of a new base pay structure, which includes a single step salary increase for each eligible employee and a 2.5% increase to the 2022 compensation plan. Additionally, there's a 3% cost increase in employee health benefits, but no increases within dental or the other ancillary employee benefits. Then we went through and reallocated our current resources based on needs and actual history. The budget does support our current full-time equivalent employees, so there's no adjustment to the amount of employees within plan for 2022 within the staff. And again, the 2022 general fund budget as presented is structurally balanced. Some additional assumptions made within the budget as presented. We adjusted the multi-year funding strategy to support street capital improvement, or in that program. We actually reduced some of the funds allocated toward future street capital projects, but more also, we included some funding for Economic Development Authority funding. This is the first time that we've allocated general fund dollars toward economic development. So that is certainly meeting a goal of the city of Winsted. In addition to that, right now, we still are not receiving the property tax abatements that we approved in 2017 or 2020. Once those abatements end, we will receive additional revenue from those projects. Moving forward, again, within the general fund, looking at a line item by line item review of changes over $1,000, so a little bit more significant changes. Starting with the administration department, you can see most of the changes were associated to employment costs. But also we do have elections coming up in 2022, so that is an increase. We need an additional $3,000 to cover those elections. Moving on to general government, you can see that $10,000 is budgeted within the general government for the economic development funding. And then, as I previously stated, there's a reduction in the capital improvement transfer from the general fund into the capital fund for, again, street projects, and it also does affect the parks fund as well. Then you can see generating some revenue, kind of letting the cat out of the bag here a little bit, but the general property tax increase, slight increase in local government aid, and an anticipated reduction in cable TV franchise fees, which is a reflection of reduction over 2021 actuals. Moving forward with some of the public safety type activity with the police department and fire protection, employment costs associated, or employment cost increases make up a bulk of it within these funds. Try to offset that with reduction in some of the squad operations with the computer system. Should generate some additional revenue through the post board and through state grants and aids to meet some of their training requirements, but also seeing a drop in anticipated revenue in terms of charges for services and county and state fines, reflecting activity both in 2020 and 2021. Moving on to the fire department, the city of Winstead's portion of the fire department increase per unit increase is just under $4,000 as planned for 2022. Moving on to public works, some cost increases in employment cost, as well as significant increases in street maintenance for street crack filling, street repair, general street repair, patching, etc. And then also some storm sewer work planned for some additional storm sewer work planned for 2022. To offset some of those increases, we did decrease some of the costs or some of the funds allocated toward city beautification. Anticipated reduction in some electrical utility costs just from a budgeting standpoint. That's to meet our actuals. We transferred the costs of sewer jetting out of public works into our sewer enterprise fund. That's reflected on the spreadsheet. And also in 2020, we budgeted the debt service for the stormwater projects that we implemented. That was previously budgeted through our debt service. Our auditors would like that budgeted through our general fund, our general levy instead. So that's that reflection of the $40,870. That's that line item. So you'll see a significant decrease in our debt levy this year, and then this increase to the general levy. So it's an accounting of where those funds are being accounted for. And lastly, within the parks, we do have a significant increase to our lawn service contract, and we try to offset that by making reductions in planned improvements in repairs and maintenance throughout the park system to offset those costs. Moving forward, looking at this pie chart of the total revenue, a picture of the total revenue or where the city of Winsted receives the revenue. Again, the majority of that is through the property tax levies, as well as through the state government, which is essentially the local government aid, very common to other cities our size. And then we balance it out with some miscellaneous revenue through fees, fines, and permits, etc. That revenue is broken down through these departments as shown on this spreadsheet, with the bulk of the revenue activity happening in the general government. We do have some revenue in public safety. Again, like I said, with the post board reimbursements and state grants and aids to cover training, etc. for the police department. A slight amount of revenue within the public works department. That's a reflection of an agreement we have with McLeod County to do snow removal on certain county streets, snow removal and street sweeping, and then a slight amount of revenue in the park system as well regarding rental activity and such. On the expenditure side, broken down here, the bulk, or again, our expenditures are pretty even in how they're broken down to some degree, split between public safety, public works, and general government. And then you can see fire protections at about 7%. Again, I think this is pretty representative of a lot of communities of our size and how our expenditures are broken down throughout the different departments and operations. Nothing uncommon there. Again, on this spreadsheet, you can see changes from year over from 2020 to 2021. An overall increase in expenditures of 4.3%, or a dollar amount of $88,280 of operational expenditures. But of that $88,000, mind you, $40,000 of that was for that storm sewer debt service project. Looking at our general fund budget projections, as you can see, our expenditures and revenues are projected to increase over the next 5 years, but you can see our fund balance is pretty stagnant. That is something we'll likely need to address more thoroughly in future budgeting work sessions and budgeting years to keep up with our revenues and our expenditures, that we can cover those from a fund balance standpoint. Moving forward to the property tax levy itself now. Again, as a reminder to the residents, per state law, the city council must certify the preliminary property tax levy on or before September 30th of each year. The final property tax levy can be lowered, but it cannot exceed the preliminary levy. And then the city's property tax levy is comprised of two parts, the general levy and the debt levy, and that equals our overall property tax levy. So again, we'll review both of those levies. But before getting that, some considerations that should be mentioned. Market values continue to increase throughout Minnesota in all property categories. So property tax rates continue to decline as a result of those increases in property tax values. In 2021, the certified property tax levies increased by 4% throughout the state of Minnesota. And then over the past 3 years, the average increase for city levies was 5.8%. City staff continues to expect this upward trend, even more now with the issues with inflation that we're experiencing. And then lastly, we were notified through our budget process, as I mentioned, that the amount of local government aid, our allocation of local government aid, is increasing by $2,616. And again, that makes up, our overall local government aid makes up about 34% of our budgeted revenue. Our property tax classifications here in Winsted, this is certainly unique for a city our size, that our commercial industrial base makes up 36% of our tax classification here in the city. I would say more standard number would be closer to 28 to 29% for a city our size. So that is certainly a reflection of our efforts in economic development and building up that strong commercial industrial base. Getting into a little bit of detail of our debt service levy. So again, this is specific to our debt service. Our overall debt service levy, as proposed for 2022, is $364,448. From a projection standpoint, we're projecting to potentially take on more debt service in 2023 that we'll be discussing during our goal setting session, as well as in future city council work sessions. Please note that of that debt service that I mentioned, that's specific debt service within that debt service levy. We also have debt service in our enterprise funds, both water and sewer, as well as through the fire operations fund for a fire engine that we purchased. So again, not all debt issues are financed by the debt levy. Looking at our property tax levy history, as well as our general fund history comparing 2020, 2021, and 2022. The levy as proposed this evening is proposed to go up by 3.14%, or a dollar change of $48,496. And I think that's really probably the most important number. You know, we're going to increase the revenue by that $48,000 compared to 2021. On September 21st of 2020, on that date, we had set our preliminary levy again at 7.91%. So when our residents received their tax notification in early November, that was a reflection of our preliminary levy, again, which was 7.91%. Since that time, we've worked hard to decrease the proposed and recommended levy. And again, as I stated, that's where we are here tonight at 3.14%. So that represents a decrease of $73,661 from our preliminary levy. So certainly substantial. I will presented this to the City Council in the past, but again, just to reiterate, we do anticipate a significant debt relief coming in 2028 with an amount of $208,836,000 of debt service expiring after 2027. So that will certainly have a significant impact on our property tax levies. You can also, on this chart, you can see a history of what our tax levies have been in the last 4 years, ranging from 4.99% in 2020 to last year was up to 7.94%. And again, this year proposing at 3.14%. You see a slight proposed increase for 2023, or projected, I guess, is probably a better term. But that is if we would decide to take on some more debt service for some of the planned projects that we have. Again, decisions need to be made on that in the future. And that brings us again to our overall property tax levy as presented, being $1,593,048, which is a combination of the general or operating levy as well as that debt levy that we just reviewed. The impact that those numbers or those levies or that overall levy will have on the property taxes here in Winsted. This chart reflects an estimated median valued home in Winsted, which is projected to be approximately $198,616 in 2022, and that's based off our net tax capacity that's determined from our net tax capacity, which is slightly over $2 million. So if you owned a median valued home in Winsted, both in 2021 and 2022, your property taxes would go up by 3.35%, or equate to $45 in property tax increases, which would again equate then to $3.75 a month. That's if you had a median valued home in both those years. If your home value increased significantly, that number will certainly vary, or it could certainly have decreased as well. We're seeing that. I'm being notified of that as well. Our tax capacity, as you can see, our net tax capacity from 2021 to 2022 is relatively flat. It only increased by about $23,000. So I don't anticipate a lot of increases to property values based on that tax capacity, but there could certainly be variations within different properties in Winsted. But for every property that went up, it's likely that another one went down to reflect that, because there's not a lot of variation in that overall net tax capacity. A little projection onto the businesses then. If those property taxes stayed flat, or that valuation stayed flat from 2021 to 2022, again, you'll see a 2.03% increase in property taxes between those 2 years. But if your valuation changed significantly, that's where you'll see a significant difference then in your property taxes. So again, as budget and the levy as it's presented this evening responds to cost pressures, but it also continues the strategy established in 2012 to reduce the amount of bonding cost. So we're trying to limit the amount in which we have to bond for projects. Instead, we're trying to save for them upfront prior to doing the projects, and that's reflected with our capital improvement planning and funding through our general fund. But however, we did decide to lower the funding rate for street CIP funding, and that's just to respond to the current economic climate that we're in, noting that homeowners are certainly having to deal with significant inflation costs outside of their government costs. So we're trying to be the best stewards of the funds as possible and do our due diligence to get that levy as low as possible. On top of all that, though, we continue to support the Fire Department Strategic Operations Plan, which included funding future expenditures, again, without having to bond for them. And as I stated earlier, it satisfied our goal with some initial economic development funding through general levy tax dollars. How this will impact residents in Winsted, another view of that, when we look at the overall cost of being a resident in Winsted. And that's a combination of the property tax levy with the assumption of a median value to home. Then also your water and sewer rates as presented. Those water and sewer rates on this chart are assumed a usage of approximately 6,000 gallons a month, which would probably be a family of 4, 5, or 6. Family of 1 or 2 certainly will not use 6,000 gallons a month and would likely be closer to 2,000 gallons a month. So again, these assumptions on this chart are based off of 6,000 gallons used of water and sewer a month. So with those assumptions, including the median value to home, your cost to be a resident in Winsted would go up by $162.93 compared to 2021, or an increase of 5.20%. But that is a decrease of $24 from our preliminary levy. So again, reflecting our efforts to significantly decrease that preliminary levy for some cost savings as best as possible. So what's next? Again, this meeting is your opportunity to address your 2022 budget and tax levy concerns with the City Council. The City Council will consider this testimony and adopt a final 2022 budget and tax levy at their next meeting on December 21st. If you have questions or concerns about your assessed value, you can challenge those values in the spring at the annual local Board of Appeals meeting, which is held by McLeod County. So you'll get a notification from McLeod County. It's typically, you receive that notification in the middle to the end of February, and then those local Board of Appeals meetings are typically held in mid-March to early April. So look for that notification if you want to challenge your property tax values as they're being presented. With that being said, that's all that I have for this evening. I will certainly entertain any questions of the public or the City Council at this point.
We'll turn it over to the public. Anybody who wants to comment or ask questions, step up to the podium and just give us your address for the records. Having seen or not seen anybody moving forward, I then would look for a motion for closing the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. We'll move on to the next item then. That's the under old business. And that's gonna be, we're gonna talk about a work order for professional service contract with Bolton and Mink. Adam?
Sure. Mr. Deputy Mayor, if you just bear with me for 1 second, I want to pull up a diagram to assist in this discussion.
While you're doing that, thanks for walking everybody through that report.
Yeah, and I know that can get a little bit dry, but it's certainly important to be thorough with that. At our last City Council meeting, Bolton and Mink presented work order number 10 for the taxi lane in design and construction, grant administration, etc., for future taxi lane construction. And this is based off a CIP recommendation of the Airport Commission. So again, at that time then, the city council wanted some additional information regarding if we would do a design of all 3 taxi lanes versus just the first taxi lane, the westernmost taxi lane, and if there'd be any cost savings associated with that. After Ron Retzel, our aviation engineer, reviewed that request, he presented a new work order number 10, which would increase the overall project design costs or overall cost of work order number 10 by approximately $4,000. But our it must have been more than $4,000. But our 5% share of the cost increase is only $1,065. And again, the benefit to that would be is we're locking in these costs that are needed in the future anyway, right now, and we're locking them in to making sure we're getting, right now we're grant eligible for this through MnDOT and FAA. In the future, MnDOT may not be providing that 5%. So we're kind of locking in that 5% grant at this point versus in the future, when we want to do taxi lane 2 and 3, that 5% might not be there then. So Ron agrees that's likely a good idea. This also will include now the stormwater design, which is up in this area, which is needed. So again, I feel good with that recommendation, and I would certainly recommend moving forward with work order number 10 then for that engineering, design, construction administration, and grant administration of the taxi lane construction. With that being said, are there any questions regarding this item or the need for the taxi lane, et cetera?
What's the timing on it?
If I remember right, I didn't read the memo today. I read it yesterday or on Friday. They're starting the design right now. In fact, they're scheduled to do soil borings this week in the area. Design will happen over the winter, and then we'll come back to the city council with estimated project costs and to be authorized to put out for bidding. Then we'll look at project time in August, likely.
Okay.
Any other comments from the council? Before you make a motion, Glenn, you had something you wanted to ask or say?
Glenn Weibel, 540 First Street North, on the Airport Commission. At a past meeting, the Bolton Mink representative Ron stated there was free money that would cover the cost of this taxiway extension. And I guess my question is, what happened to that now it's a state and local participation?
I don't recall the conversation regarding free or grant money available, 100% grant money available for this project. The last time we had 100% grant coverage was for the rehab of the entrance road and the parking lot in the current taxi lane. That was covered 100% by FAA, and that was because of some of the CARES COVID money that was available. Again, that was for our current taxi lane rehab, not for new construction.
Well, then I misunderstood that at the meeting. Is this contract going to address the total drainage of that area?
Yes, it'll be designed accordingly. So the current soil borings they're going to be doing this week will look at the drainage issues on that entire south green space.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Glenn. Any comments from the council?
I'll motion to authorize the city administrator to execute work order number 10, the professional services contract between the city of Winsted and Bolton and Mink Incorporated to provide design, bidding, construction, and grant administration services for the construction of a new taxi lane at the Winsted Municipal Airport.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. No new business tonight. The Lions are supposed to be here tonight, and
I'm thinking that the gentleman that was going to represent the Lions wasn't able to make it tonight. So apologize for that.
We'll just go right on to the next item, which is the open forum. Again, if anybody wants to address the council, step up to the podium and your address.
Glenn Weibel again, 540 First Street North. In a past council meeting, it was discussed about doing some sidewalk projects. I asked that you look at the block of the 500 block of First Street North.
Okay.
The problems are the trees that were planted on the boulevard are lifting all the concrete, and it's not a safe place to walk. And the chief of police has even mentioned that it's not a good place to ride bicycle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, that area's been covered in the report. The whole town needs some help. Anybody else? Okay, with that, we'll come to the city administrator update and announcements.
Sure. I have a handful of announcements for this evening. Please note that in the near future, city staff will be sending out notification regarding the Don C. Guggmus Service Award nominations. So we'll be soliciting nominations for that award, which is a community service award reflecting, obviously, community service within the city of Winsted. We did not award this in 2020 due to COVID and the lack of opportunities associated with COVID, et cetera, for community service. So we're excited to have nominations now for 2021, and certainly encourage all the residents of Winsted to help us find nominations for this prestigious award. Upcoming meetings, we have a Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing scheduled for December 13th at 6 p.m. This is regarding text amendments to Chapter 15, specifically to short-term rental. So I encourage anybody in the public interested in that topic to please attend that public hearing. Next, please note that the City Hall is going to be closed on a handful of dates coming up. Starting with tomorrow, it'll be closed from noon to 2 o'clock for some staff development and training. And it'll be closed on the 23rd and 24th for the Christmas holidays, and also 31st as part of our annual flex holiday that was chosen by the staff. So a couple of dates here when the City Hall will be closed. And then next, I've got some good news. We previously applied for the Transportation Economic Development Infrastructure Grant to aid in the funding of County State Aid to Highway 5 extension. We were notified yesterday that we were awarded that grant.
Great.
That's a grant award of $750,000 toward that project, which has an overall estimated project cost of about $2.8 million. So this is certainly significant in funding that project. We are continuing on the design side of the project. We're going to meet again, all the stakeholders, in early January. We're still working on some site acquisition, but again, this is a big first step, or a big step in moving forward with that project, which is still scheduled or on schedule for 2023. So again, very exciting news for the city of Winsted and McLeod County to receive this funding. We'll continue to be seeking additional funding opportunities in the meantime, but this is certainly a nice first step. Lastly, this evening, I would like to introduce Chris Barr. Maybe if you want to come to the dais here, if you're willing. Chris Barr is the new maintenance supervisor. He'll be replacing Dave Meyer, who is retiring on January 4th. We're certainly excited to have Chris here working with us in Winsted. Monday was his first day. Chris, maybe if you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, maybe give a little bit of brief work history and experience in public works, and then feel any questions the city council wants to throw at you.
All right, thanks, Adam. Well, like Adam said, my name is Chris Barr. I've been in public works for 15 years. The last 2 years, I was taken over as the role in my previous position, and didn't work out. So with that, I'm just happy to be on board here and looking forward to working with everybody.
Well, we're happy to have you here. Do a good job. Because if you don't, we'll hear about it.
Chris has been able to work with Dave now a little bit.
Yeah, so Chris started on Monday, so it's only 2 days in. But Dave will be on staff assisting and onboarding Chris through January 4th. So it'll be about a month of onboarding and training. We've developed a checklist essentially of all the items we need to get trained in on, so we can certainly work through that, or we will be working through that over the next month, encompassing, as minor details as calling in NOTAMs at the airport to as major projects as snow removal, etc.
Is there any licensing he has to acquire?
He acquired that prior to his hiring, so he's all licensed per our needs, and
Thank you.
water, CDLs, etc. So no additional licensing. I've portrayed to Chris through the interview process that the city council is fantastic about training their staff. So any licensing that he feels he needs or training he wants, we'll certainly support that. Again, with the idea that just provides better services for the residents.
Welcome aboard, and I'll ask you what I always got asked. You came back the second day?
And it even snowed, so what a welcoming.
And you don't have to do everything the way Dave did it.
I'm sure you'll do a good job.
Yes.
Welcome to
So
Winston.
welcome, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Look
Chris.
forward to working with you.
Council have anything else?
I do not.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.